Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Thursday, and never fear, Dennis and I did not get traded during the last 2 days. The same cannot be said for a handful of NFL players, including Dennis. We've talked, it seems like ad nauseum since training camp began, about the Cowboys and Micah Parsons. I watched an 8-part documentary about the glory days of the Cowboys and their decline, which made me think seriously. All along, Jerry Jones has told us they were going to work things out and Micah Parsons would be there and not to worry. And we've seen this story before. We saw it with CeeDee Lamb. We saw it with Dak Prescott. We've seen it with Emmitt Smith. We've seen it over the years. Well, that did not end up being the case. This afternoon, the word broke early that the Cowboys were listening to trade offers for Micah Parsons. I thought that's not a good sign. And lo and behold, an hour later, Micah Parsons shipped to the Green Bay Packers for 2 first-round picks and defensive tackle Kenny Clark. Dennis, not a huge fantasy story, but a huge NFL story. What do you think this means for the Packers and the Cowboys? And what do you think this means for Jerry Jones? There have been a lot of people clamoring for him to step down. I don't think that got any quieter after listening to some of his interviews and interviews with some of his players and Jimmy Johnson in this documentary, which is a chef's kiss if you have not seen it on Netflix. I think Jerry's slipping a little bit, and this feels like a real bad move for a team that constantly says they are in the playoff hunt.
So I think the big miscalculation here was Jerry's playing the good old boy. Let's do a handshake deal. Let's talk man to man. And Micah Parsons saying, well, we're not going to do anything because I got an agent who does this stuff. And, he's the one who's going to advise and make the deal. And I don't know if Jerry was like trying to pull the wool over Micah's eyes with that whole kind of approach to it. I think that's just his old-fashioned deal-making mentality. And well, I'm the owner and I'm giving you access and I'm the GM because I own the team. I can do what I want. I think ultimately that soured Micah because Jerry basically came out and said they had an agreement. And he's like, well, wait a minute. No, we didn't agree on anything because my agent wasn't there. And then I was listening to Jim Miller and Pat Kerwin this afternoon as I was trying to rush home for the show. And one of the things that they said was that, while Jerry kept talking that we're going to get a deal done, I think when Micah decided, hey, I think I need a second opinion on my back, because I think they felt like Micah didn't really have as much leverage as he did. But because he's been banged up, and whether it's legitimate or not, saying, oh, I think I need a second opinion, now he cannot play without really being penalized because he's trying to work through this back issue. We'll see if he, plays this next weekend in Green Bay or not. So do you remember on Dallas's depth chart, did they list him as a defensive end or did they list him as
Yes, they listed him as a defensive end.
So did Marshawn Nealon become the starter or did Dante Fowler Jr. become the starter when he moved out?
Probably Fowler Jr., but I don't know that it matters that much.
Well, because I'm just trying, because I was just looking at the depth chart and trying to see, like, so what, obviously, none of these guys on Dallas's roster are going to step in and replace Micah Parsons. But one of the points that Jim Miller and Pat Kerwin kept making was that if they signed Micah Parsons to that deal that he got, or something akin to the deal he got from Green Bay, then Parsons and Dak and CeeDee Lamb would account for 50% of the salary cap. And I'm no genius, but I don't think you can win like that. Like, I mean, I get this. I do it in fantasy in when I'm doing an auction, sometimes I'll go, stars and scrubs and try to build a team and win. And sometimes it works. And maybe sometimes it works if you can hit on the right rookies and hit on some depth signings that overperform, where they're at, you might be able to be competitive for a season, but everything has to go exactly right. And I don't know that trading Micah Parsons was the right thing to do. I think Dallas ultimately cost themselves money waiting to sign Dak Prescott and waiting to sign CeeDee Lamb and waiting to sign Micah Parsons. It cost them several million, probably tens of millions of dollars per season across the three of them. I haven't, we talked records on Tuesday. I haven't had a chance to go in and reconfigure because I've had Green Bay missing the playoffs, getting edged out by Minnesota for second place in the NFC North. I got to rethink things. Micah Parsons he's a difference maker. And
I think for Dallas, probably their best case scenario is that they're the Bengals of last year, where they are putting up some incredible passing game and offensive numbers and just trying to outscore as many people as possible, because their defense wasn't that great last year.
Right. And even with Parsons, there was a lot of talk it wasn't going to be great this year.
Yeah,
either.
Now, one thing is, I hope. So Matt Eberflus is their defensive coordinator. I forgot he came over from Chicago. He's got to be regretting that a little bit. I hope Brian Schottenheimer is just getting a pass for this year, because they gave him a head case wide receiver in George Pickens, who a lot of people are taking bets on whether he even stays with the team the whole season, and then they just dealt their, in my opinion, their one and only great defensive player, because I know Trayvon Diggs had some good seasons, and they have another corner. The one that got all the interception returns for touchdowns, but I don't know if I think those guys are great. And so it's going to be, Deron Bland. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. I liked Green Bay before to be in the playoffs. I think they still can be, but they're not without their own questions, like wide receiver production. Jordan Love just had to have surgery on his thumb, so let's not completely rule that out. But they have a good running game, and if they can maintain a good defense, I think that could improve them a little bit.
Green Bay, it's going to come down to their offensive line. And, they're starting a 7th round pick at left tackle and Rasheed Walker. Getting Elgton Jenkins back is definitely good. But where I mentioned, who do we talk about earlier this week? I think the Saints, who nobody expects anything out of, have 4 first round and 1 second round pick. Jenkins is is a second rounder. Sean Ryan's a third rounder. Zach Tom is a fourth rounder. Rasheed Walker's a seventh rounder. Aaron Banks was signed as a free agent. Now, granted, Zach Tom is pretty awesome, and Sean Ryan's played pretty well. But when it comes to what they really need to do now with that defense, I talk to Cole all the time, and to put it in baseball terms, he'll talk about, well, I don't think my velocity is up to par for pitching. And I'm like, dude, you throw strikes. I'm like, look, it's all about just throw strikes and play defense. And for Green Bay, it's going to come down to, look, just run the ball and play defense. Run the ball. And they've got weapons, but as long as Jordan Love's thumb holds up okay, it doesn't get any additional injuries, he doesn't have to be a world beater at quarterback. They've got plenty of weapons at the skill positions. So I got to be honest, I won't be surprised if they win the division.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I think for Jerry, though, that talks about him getting a real general manager are only going to increase, because this whole narrative about his handshake deal and things, you're right about that not being really the way things work. But if anything, watching that Cowboys documentary, it certainly made it seem like that was kind of how he first got into it and how he did things in the 90s. Like, if you watch, they have a whole segment on there about the negotiations with Deion Sanders when they pulled him from San Francisco, and when he's talking about how he negotiated with Michael Irvin and kind of the talks with Emmitt Smith. I think he was used to doing that kind of brand of negotiation and it working. And it's been, time catches up for all of these people who were once great at something. We've talked about before. Bob Knight, a Hall of Fame coach, the way he coached the game, I would not fly in college today. The way that Bill Parcells kind of coached and built teams probably wouldn't work the same today. We know that sort of happened with Bill Belichick. What was effective in the early 2000s became less effective recently. And it might just be time for Jerry to finally admit this is not working.
Look, there's a reason I don't coach my kids' sports teams. And it's not because I don't know ball, because I think I do know ball. But I'm not a soft and fuzzy coach. I'm barely a soft and fuzzy dad. So it just, I know who I am. Like, I am the guy. They're like, look, it's supposed to be fun for the boys. And I'm like, you know what's fun? Fucking winning. That's fun. But people get mad when you say that to 7-year-olds.
We'll just call you Dennis Bob Knight Bennett. There were some other news stories. I think we'll get to a couple of trades in a minute, but Rashee Rice, it's gone back and forth. He's supposed to have the September 30th meeting, so he's going to play the first 4 games, and then we'll see what kind of suspension comes. Then it was the NFL's looking at a 10-game suspension. Maybe they can be talked down to 8, and you're thinking, my God, if that starts week 5, goodbye fantasy season. And then the last week, they started talking about how Rice and the NFL were motivated to get this settled before the season so that whatever punishment would begin week 1. That ended up happening. They agreed on a 6-game suspension, which will start week 1. So that knocks him out till mid-October. For both the Chiefs and for fantasy, I think it's not as bad as it could be, but you and I had both started to kind of lower Rice overall just because of these looming long suspension and uncertainty. And I still think I feel probably better with him ending up in the 50s because, he's coming back from missing all season with an injury. Now he's going to be suspended for 6 games. We've seen players, even talented players, who miss a huge chunk at the beginning of the season. It takes a little while to work in, and Kansas City doesn't exactly have a soft schedule. So, I think it could be, if you're, depending on how expensive he is in redraft, and a lot of people probably doing their redrafts this weekend. I know we're going to be doing our show league. Where would you feel like he is somebody you would take in a redraft draft and feel like there was value, knowing that you probably weren't going to have him as a great starting option until week 9 or 10?
You know, I like Rashee Rice, and I think I would. You can get Hollywood Brown pretty late, and if you buy into the Kansas City offense, which, let's be fair, it hasn't been. Patrick Mahomes isn't throwing for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns like he did early in his career. But I do feel like with Rice and Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, they are kind of geared a little more towards that passing game. And yes, I know they still got Kelsey. So if I can get, I would be willing to draft Rice probably as my first flex. If I believe, hey, I think this guy's going to be good. So that would be 2 running backs, 3.
Let me give you. I just looked at their schedule to see if this makes any difference for you. Week 7, they're home against the Raiders, which is not a terrible matchup, not an incredible matchup, but that would be his first potential game back, October 19th. Then they're home against the Commanders, which wouldn't be too bad. But then at Buffalo, which I think would be a tough one. Bye week in week 10, at the Broncos week 11. Then, you're home for the Colts. You have the Cowboys, you have the Texans. Maybe it gets a little bit more prime there. But that, third game potentially back at the Bills. Then you have a bye week. Then you're at the Broncos. Those are not optimal matchups.
But good players score points. And
not against the Broncos and Bills.
It just, I think that it would take some balls to invest that high, but I'm more comfortable if I target Hollywood Brown a round and a half earlier to pair him up, because I still believe that Patrick Mahomes is a pretty good fantasy quarterback, and it's going to be a pass heavy team. Yes, they've got a lot of weapons, but Rashee Rice he's a good wide receiver, and starting Hollywood Brown for the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season, if I can get, wide receiver 28, wide receiver 30 performance out of Rashee Rice on the back half of the season, wide receiver, if I can get wide receiver 36 production out of Rashee Rice for the last, 6 or 7 games of the year, I think I'd take that.
Yeah, so let's see. Fantasy playoffs are usually week 15 to 17. So their fantasy playoffs are Chargers, Titans, which would be, I don't think, a very good defense, and then Broncos during championship week. So it's not a great schedule. I think I'd have to see him fall. I have a feeling people are still just going to take him up in the early middle rounds, and I'm happy to let somebody else have it, because I'm with you. I think Brown would be a better bargain given where everything's sitting, because I feel like Worthy is the one that's going to go first.
Yeah,
Worthy feels like the kind of profile that's hit or miss. Kelsey's going to go decently early, and that makes somewhat of sense. But Hollywood Brown's kind of the most under the radar guy.
And he has Brown has a history of being good. He has a history of being injured too.
His current ADP is wide receiver 58, going like about 160 overall. That feels more worth a swing for me.
So that's what 160th is what 12th round, 13th round.
Let me do well, that's not the kind of math I want a chance just doing in
Well,
my
10
head
is 100.
at this
10
age.
is 120.
That would be the middle of the 13th round.
So, I think I'd be if I'm going to draft Rice in the 9th, late 8th or 9th, I'd draft Brown in the 12th to hedge my bets.
Yeah, and I wouldn't consider Rice before the 10th or 11th, so I'll let somebody else have him. A couple other.
Still take Brown in the 12th to snipe him, right?
Yeah, maybe the 12th, or where it looks like he's going mid 13th. That's not too bad. A couple other players, wide receivers were traded. Adam Thielen was traded back to the Vikings, who are hurting. Obviously, Jordan Addison suspended for 3 games. Jalen Naylor banged up. And in a kind of a surprising move to me, Tim Patrick was traded from the Detroit Lions to the Jacksonville Jaguars. It came out that the Jaguars have been trying to trade for a receiver for a little bit of time, that they had been in serious negotiations for Devon Vele, which might explain why the Broncos got a 4th round pick to move him, that they're just looking for some bigger wide receivers. I was curious exactly what that means that they don't like about the Jacksonville. All those people I've thought have been a little too high on De'Ami Brown anyway, but now it kind of creates a weird cluster. If they're targeting a bigger target, it makes me think that's for red zone in particular. And maybe that is the case because, Evan Engram was a huge body who's no longer there. And obviously not sure exactly what you're going to get with Travis Hunter. The Adam Thielen move, I did not know Adam Thielen the past 2 off seasons has trained with JJ McCarthy. So that could end up being pretty good for the development of JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. Having somebody he's comfortable with, he's not that there are a lot of people that I would call a threat to Justin Jefferson, but Adam Thielen's game is not anywhere near what Justin Jefferson's is, or Jordan Addison for that measure. I think that Thielen out of the slot with Addison and Jefferson outside, maybe, just maybe, JJ McCarthy's going to be slinging it. The Tim Patrick deal, that's De'Ami Brown, 6'1", almost 200. Travis Hunter, 6'1", 185. Well, Brian Thomas, I haven't clicked on him yet, but I think he's, 6'4", 6'3", 210. I get that maybe you want a big wide receiver that doesn't expect to have the ball thrown to him, so that's why you went and got Tim Patrick. They still list De'Ami Brown as the starter and Patrick as a backup. I don't think Patrick or Brown, either one, are necessarily going to earn many targets or be fantasy viable. I think they like Brenton Strange at the tight end position. He's a decent enough athlete. He's not in Evan Ingram's class, clearly, but he is a pretty good athlete and will provide nice two-way play. But that offense, I think, is going to run through Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter.
Yeah, and that would that would make some sense as well. The last bit of news I wanted to ask you about is kind of what do we make of what's going on with Joe Mixon? Obviously, we already knew that Mixon was on NFI with the ankle injury, not going to be available for 4 weeks. They talked to Nick Caserio, and he was very non-committal about whether we would see Mixon at all this season. That sort of gave me pause as somebody who has a few shares of Mixon in spots. How is it making you feel?
Not great, Bob. It's there's something going on with his foot, and they haven't and maybe because they're not in season is why, and they don't have to disclose it yet. Well, now what did they put him on IR?
No, he got, I believe, transferred to either NFI or PUP. I think it went, and I don't understand how. So presumably the injury is some kind of carryover from, because it was foot and ankle injuries that bothered him last year. So I don't know why he qualified for non-football injury list anyway.
Yeah, they've left a couple details out of that.
Well, and that with the mercurial, and you just don't hear anything about it, and it's weird. I'm looking it up.
No, they're going to roll with Chubb and Dameon Pierce. I like Pierce has an opportunity to bounce back a little bit, but he's been banged up. Their offensive scheme is kind of swung. The pendulum has swung back to favor Pierce's running style a little more. He wasn't good in that zone scheme. Chubb, lots of reports about he doesn't look explosive at all. He's a almost 30-year-old back, and they are, he's coming back from another devastating knee injury. So, well, if anybody can do it, Nick Chubb can do it. I don't know. I think I'm avoiding this backfield unless I'm getting cheap parts.
Do you think something non-football, because I just looked it up, he definitely got put on the non-football injury reserve list, which has him out at least 4 weeks. And they're saying it's a foot and ankle injury, which I just don't. Something seems weird about this whole situation to me, and I kind of agree with you. If you have Mixon in Dynasty, you can't really move him right now because there's, you're not going to get any kind of a return. Do you just hold out hope that he comes back?
You don't have a whole heck of a lot of choice.
Yeah.
I know I'd been trying to move him in a 16-team league. Looks like I might have actually pulled it off. So it was a team where I had been I won it for the first time. 16 team, we start 10 IDPs, and I won it for the first time a couple years ago. And then I had been trying to get rid of Chubb and Mixon.
Yeah, and I think the primary place that I have him is also it's either a 14 or a 16 team dynasty, and I liked that team potentially. It's a super flex, and it was a deep league, but I don't really have a running back too, so I guess this is now.
Well, I got lucky looking back at my trades. In May, May 5th, I was able to move Mixon for what projects as a late 26 first.
Yeah, so maybe I'll try to.
I don't think you're going to get that for him now.
No, and that's the thing. I don't. Yeah, I guess I'll just wait and hope that he comes back. Well, speaking of hopes and hopes against our better judgment, it seems about right to start talking about our playoff picks. This is our last preseason show. On Monday, we will have a live show. We will be doing our redraft draft, so you can join us as we're going through that. And then next Thursday, obviously, will be the full week one preview because the first game of the season, a Micah Parsons affair, is on next Thursday night. So today is the day to do we'll do our playoff picks, our picks for the AFC NFC championship game, our Super Bowl pick, and then a couple of picks for the 4 kind of major awards that would impact our fantasy thinking: NFL MVP, Coach of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, and Offensive Player of the Year. So Dennis, we'll start with the AFC. What are your 7 AFC playoff teams?
So I have, and these are the seeded orders I have them in. I have Denver, Baltimore.
You have Denver
Buffalo.
as the number 1 seed.
I do.
You're so mean to me.
Man, I got to tell you, I went through. I just I'm not good at this.
You know what? I loved it more when no one was on Denver, and now everybody's on Denver's jock. And as a fan, that's just not the place I want to be anymore. But okay, so sorry, Broncos number 1.
Lions fan, I can totally relate.
Broncos are not. That's true. I'll get you back here in a minute. Broncos are either 1. Sorry, Baltimore was 2. I think.
Yep. Buffalo and then Jacksonville. They're my division winners. I have Cincinnati, my top wild card, Kansas City, and Houston.
So you and I have 6 of the 7 teams in common, not anywhere in the near. But you have Jacksonville. I have a different team as my 7th team in. I have Buffalo, Kansas City, Buffalo 1, Cincinnati 2, Houston 3, Denver 4, Baltimore top wild card at 5, Kansas City at 6, and then the New England Patriots under Mike Vrabel as the 7th seed.
I wanted to put New England in. I really do. But
I know I went back and forth. Jacksonville and New England are really close, as is the Chargers. To me, those were kind of the 3 I was going back and forth about. As my last one, and that's where I ended up. I will give my NFC first. I have the Eagles 1, San Francisco 49ers 2, Detroit Lions 3, Tampa Bay Buccaneers 4, Green Bay Packers 5, top wild card, Washington Commanders 6. And I went back and forth, and I landed with the Seattle Seahawks as my number 7 team.
I don't know. I'm just I want to see, like, I'm pulling for Sam Darnold. I love the redemption.
I just feel like the Rams, the 49ers, and the Seahawks are all going to be kind of playing round robin all season. And Matthew Stafford's situation, I don't feel great about. And I actually think that the Rams might have the worst defense of those 3, which not that they have a bad defense, but I like what Mike McDonald is doing in Seattle. And I think one of the most underrated moves of the offseason was San Francisco bringing back Robert Saleh to be the defensive coordinator, because when Shanahan and Saleh were paired together, if they even have a modicum of injury luck, that team's going to go back to being pretty dangerous.
So for me in the NFC, my number 1 seed, San Francisco 49ers. I agree with you. I think Robert Saleh sliding back in there with Kyle Shanahan and some of those weapons. I know they had some turnover this year, but I mean, they've got Nick Bosa and a cast of great defenders. Let's see, then I have Philadelphia coming out of the East. Have Detroit out of the North and Tampa Bay out of the South, with Washington, my top wild card, the Rams second, and Minnesota squeaking in last. That being said, this was all done prior to the Micah Parsons trade. I'm not sure how I would shake it out. I've got to kind of go back through the old playoff predictor machine and see. I feel like, honestly, I feel like the potential is there that Green Bay could win the division and Detroit could be the one that's out. Minnesota still stays second.
I have to be honest. I've been consistently out on Minnesota. I just went and looked. I only have them at 5-12. I don't think they're going to be good. I think that's been a little bit of Kevin O'Connell's time too. They have an incredible season, and then the wheels completely fall off the bus. So who do you have in your AFC Championship game?
I have Baltimore over Denver.
And I have the Buffalo Bills over the Cincinnati Bengals.
I just don't think Cincinnati has the defense to get past round 1, even with Trey Hendrickson back.
Sometimes
I want to believe.
Sometimes you don't need defense and
they're going to score a bajillion points. I get it, but
I mean, I like Al Golden. I think they'll be good enough. The way my seedings ended up coming out, I had Baltimore and Denver meeting in the wild card round, and then I had Denver and Cincinnati meeting in the divisional round. I want to love Denver. If Denver goes all the way to the AFC Championship game, as a fan, I'll be happy. As a fan too, I'm just a little pessimistic. I mean, if you remember last year, everybody thought, oh, they could be a sneaky wild card team. And I was like, this team's gonna fucking suck. They're gonna win 6 games. So, I'd rather be wrong the other way. And so my NFC Championship game, I went with the Lions over the Packers. What did you go with?
I have Philadelphia over San Francisco.
That would probably make more sense, but I in my playoffs I picked 2 road teams winning in the divisional round.
I ended up going with the 2 seed in each and my picks for the championship game are chalk. It's 1 versus 2 in the AFC and the NFC. I just have the 2 seed winning both of them.
Yeah, and so if I would have gone chalk, I would have had San Francisco and the Eagles in as well. I did not go chalk in the NFC. I did in the AFC. The way I had the playoffs shaking out is Cincinnati withstanding Denver and Buffalo finally getting Kansas City in the playoffs to shake off that monkey before Green Bay and the Lions meeting for a third time. So who you had? You said you had Philadelphia over San Francisco and Baltimore over Denver. So you have the Eagles and the Ravens, which would be a game I would not want to watch, to be honest.
Yeah. Why not? You don't like good offense?
Well, if you wanted good offense, you wouldn't have picked the Ravens. So
I love Lamar Jackson, man.
I'd rather be shot in the testicles than see the Ravens win a Super Bowl. I have to be honest.
Well, as a Browns fan, me too. But, I love watching Lamar Jackson play. Anyways, I have Baltimore over Philadelphia in the Super Bowl.
It's been a lot of years of disappointing Super Bowl outcomes. Last year was kind of the lesser of 2 evils. If that came to fruition, I would call that the greater of 2 evils. But that might be befitting the current times. I have the Bills up for the Lions. Maybe it's Hard Knocks, and that really is a struggle for me because I don't think any team has ever appeared on Hard Knocks and had a good season. And I've thought about that, but maybe this is the ultimate Game of Thrones ending fan in me, but it's like, who has a better story? It's the last season for the Bills Stadium. All these lasts, and I just like Josh Allen. I want to see that dude do well. I like Joe Burrow too. When we were watching that quarterback series, I'm susceptible to these damn documentaries because it's 3 of my final 4 teams are 2 guys I loved in the quarterback series, Jared Goff and Joe Burrow, and the guy I've been watching all summer on Hard Knocks of Buffalo. So I played on that scenario, touching other teams' button, and then I never felt good about it, so I'd have to go back and put Buffalo in. And I didn't feel great conviction. We'll call it the you're due, and that was the game I wanted last year. Would have been Buffalo and Detroit, and of course we didn't get it. And maybe I'll just keep picking it until we get that win.
I honestly, as I was going through, I was thinking, man, am I going to get Philadelphia to repeat? Let's because I love a dynasty. I'm a Pistons fan, grew up, a Michigan sports fan. And so I was a Pistons fan and I love the bad boys. But when the Bulls beat them and started winning, I like watching great players and great teams. So I didn't, it sucked that the Pistons' reign ended, but watching Chicago win 6 out of 8 championships in a row, that was great. Watching Tiger Woods just completely dominate. Like, not a huge golf fan, but I like, watching the Williams sisters in tennis, and just I enjoy watching that kind of greatness. And so after Philadelphia won last year, but I truly think Lamar Jackson is phenomenal, and Derrick Henry, I just, by extension, I kind of hate John Harbaugh because Jim Harbaugh is a skeezy Michigan guy and he cheated. But I want to see Lamar do well, and ultimately, I felt like Lamar would be able to make just one more play.
Be nice for Derrick Henry too, because he's carried some mediocre. I think he carried some really mediocre Titans teams deep into the playoffs, but wasn't enough to get them over too. I mean, there's players that I'd root for, but I'm with you. I don't really care for the organization, and I don't really like their coach either, if we're being honest. So let's talk some of the awards. Who do you have for NFL MVP?
So when I looked at this, it ends up, this is a quarterback award. I mean, who we kidding? Rarely does a quarterback not win it. And we have talked all off season that the Bengals are going to be bad, and Joe Burrow is going to probably lead the league in pass attempts. And he's got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and which means he's probably going to throw a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. So I have Joe Burrow winning the MVP.
I also had Joe Burrow winning the MVP. It feels like most years lately, the MVP ends up going to a quarterback of a team that's really good, but not the one seed. That was definitely the case last year, where Josh Allen helped carry this Bills team. No, they weren't the top seed, but they were really good, and it was either going to be him or Lamar. So I feel like I don't have Cincinnati as a one seed, but I have them in the playoffs. And for NFL Coach of the Year, I went with Mike Vrabel, because if the Patriots really make the playoffs, like I think that they might, that would be a pretty massive turnaround from 2 or 3 years of being bottom basement. So I thought that was good. Who do you have as your Coach of the Year?
So if I remember correctly, the voting for this happens before the playoff, right?
It happens at the end of the regular season. Yeah, it's these are regular season awards.
So I kind of went through and I'm like, well, if it's happening at this point, you can't really take, they're not going to get punished for face planting in the playoffs, or you're not going to get rewarded for being a wild card team that makes a run. I went with my number one seed out of the NFC. I got Kyle Shanahan winning Coach of the Year.
And that would be a big one too, because they were 4th place in their division last year.
And I get the, a lot of time it's somebody that, really causes a team to take a leap. They've got a good team. They had a ton of injuries last year. I think if they get the 1 seed, I think Shanahan, if he's not the guy, I think he deserves to really be in the conversation with a loud voice.
Yeah, and I think he would be pretty good choice. So who do you have as your offensive rookie of the year?
Who did you have as Coach of the Year?
I had Vrabel.
Vrabel, that's right. My offensive rookie of the year, this one was hard because there's several very good guys, but ultimately it come down to who's going to get the volume and put up the numbers. And I went with Ashton Jeanty. I feel like that's kind of a chalk one. I thought about Cam Ward. If Tennessee plays well, he may get a lot of consideration. It's not a super strong quarterback class. So Ward could easily stand out amongst rookies. Travis Hunter was definitely a consideration. I feel like he's going to play a lot more often.
If he does a nice job, I still think there's a sneaky case for him to be defensive rookie of the year. If he's does a nice job on both sides of the ball, he'll get
Mhm.
a little extra because defensive rookie of the year is often kind of like a toss-up crapshoot unless somebody takes off.
Right. So I got Ashton Genty.
I strongly consider Janty. I think he will put out some big numbers, but it feels like in the last couple of years, they've really leaned toward the offensive rookie of the year going to a player whose team made the playoffs. And I don't think the Raiders will make the playoffs. So I went with RJ Harvey because I think he's going to have a big year. I consider Travion Henderson too, because if you believe in the Patriots, I think those two guys, Henderson and Harvey, are going to be difference makers in true areas of need for teams that you want to see take a step up. And I did, even though I am pessimistic about everyone being on the Broncos bandwagon, I did have them edging Kansas City out for the AFC West title. And I don't think that happens unless their defense remains strong and they're able to actually develop a strong running game, because I think that was one thing that really was at times a liability for them last year. You know, Bo Nix was pretty good as a passer, and they have some interesting young passing weapons. They had a good defense, but there was never really any time where I sat there and thought, man, they have a running back who's going to tear out. So teams did not have to load the box. They could play defenders back. You know, if you can get that running game going, and that has been a consistent thing from Sean Payton, and I think Harvey might be the first guy to get 1,000 yards for Denver in it may go all the way back to Terrell Davis. I have to look it up. I guess they had a couple of they had Clinton Portis after that. So Portis might have been our last really good running back, because even during the tail end of Shanahan, it was more patching it together. And even in the Super Bowl 50 era, it was like 2 or 3 guys like Ronnie Hillman and
Right.
and CJ Anderson, who I loved, but I don't remember him going for 1,000 yards either. So I'm just call it the hopefulness in me. And the last one we're going to do is Offensive Player of the Year. I went with Jamar Chase. I think he would have been the Offensive Player of the Year last year were it not for just a historic run by Saquon Barkley, because Jamar Chase led the league in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns last year, and I think he might do it again.
He might. And I really strongly considered Chase, especially because I picked Burrow as MVP. But ultimately, I ended up going with Jahmyr Gibbs. I feel like he is this next level two-way running back that, you know, runs the ball. He's got good vision between the tackles. He can work inside, elite speed. He's an elite pass catcher. And as much as David Montgomery is my guy, I think we're going to continue to see the workload shift from that 50-50 split toward Jahmyr Gibbs. And I feel like he's going to have, you know, I don't think he's going to have, you know, a 2,000 scrimmage yard season, but I think he rushes for 1,000 and maybe catches 80 balls.
Yeah, which would be pretty outstanding. Well, that'll do it for us today. Our fearless predictions. So you can bookmark this episode and come back to it in January. Maybe have a good laugh, or think, "Damn, those guys know what they're talking about."
I feel like they may be able to come back to my predictions in October. Give me hell about them.
You know, the hard thing about these is like 1 or 2 major injuries can just lampoon, you know, a team, and that you can't account for that. So, if you thought this was fun, you should enjoy. We'll be back at our regular time on Monday, but we will be drafting live. I'm pick 9. Dennis is pick 10 in a snake redraft. So there's going to be a lot of times where we're probably.
It's just going to be you and me swearing at each other for an hour and a half.
Especially since we spend all this time together and we know how each other feels about players and teams. That's it's going to be a fun time. So I'm looking forward to it. We always have fun with the draft. It's a good way to ring out a long holiday weekend. So we will see you here for that on Monday. And then next Thursday, the games are for real. Cowboys at the Eagles. No one happier about the Micah Parsons trade than the NFL itself, who did not want to have the entire week leading up to the kickoff of the season about a will they, won't they for the Cowboys. So should be some good times. We'll have the full week one preview and our picks next Thursday. So it is exciting. You've made it through a long off season. The regular season is here. But Dennis, it is a long holiday weekend. We're not back until Monday with our draft talk. So what can people do to fill that void in their lives since there is no preseason?
Well, they can do what we do. They go to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, leave a rating and a review. Listen to our vast catalog. Arm yourself so you can come at us, talk shit about how bad we are at this.
Well, and on Saturday, you can watch your college team, little tiny matchup against a small school. I don't know if you've heard of them, called Texas. So should be a heck of a way. Should be a heck of a way to kick off the season. The defending national champions hosting the latest Manning, and Texas should be at least a fun one for opening weekend.
Yeah, Saturday is going to be a heck of a day for me. I got the big fella's got a game Saturday morning at 10ish, so we're hoping to get done with that and get home in time for Ohio State kickoff. He got the news today. He's been moved to left tackle, which if you watched him last weekend at left tackle, I think the coaches might need to be drug tested. My son clearly struggled with the speed rusher out there.
You need to start going on, making a subscription to the NFL All 22 and pull as much Trent Williams tape as you can. And put that, on his laptop.
So Cole and I joke around a lot, and he's in good spirits about the debacle that was last week. And he hasn't done a lot of practicing out at left tackle. He's been the starter at center now for over a year. And I think ultimately what it came down to is the projected left tackle ended up getting called up to JV because there was an injury there and he's not coming back down. Well, our backups weren't cutting it. And our backup center is not too bad. He's all right. He needs some work, but ultimately the team's like, look, if we're going to put our best five out there, that means we're putting the big guy out at left tackle, and we're going to have to he's going to have to do some work. He's got to put in some time himself and figure it out. Here's what I loved. I asked him when he told me, I said, so did you talk to the coaches about going from a 2-point stance so you could deal a little more effectively with those speed rushers? He's like, no, I forgot. I'm like, well, are you just going to do it then? He's like, no. I'm certainly not going to do something my coaches didn't tell me I could. I'm like, well, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm like, all right, kid, I got you. Hopefully he figures out that going from a 2-point stance is going to give him about a half a second extra. But, I told my wife, she's like, oh, that's terrible. I'm like, terrible? I'm like, left tackle is where the money's at, baby. That's good for us.
Yeah. Well, it would have been nice. The terrible part is getting switched, like when you're in the season, when you've been practicing and training and mentally preparing. That's the tough part, but hopefully good chance to rise above. He wouldn't be the first person that got thrown out onto an island and left tackle unexpectedly.
Yeah,
maybe what you need to do is watch some Joe Alt tape, because aren't they throwing him over to the left side now?
They are.
Yeah. So somebody else thought that they had it on lock.
And I told my kids all the time, I'm like, look, if nothing else, we rise to the occasion. So I think he'll be fine. He's going to have to listen to me, give him a pep talk for the next 36 hours. So.
Well,
if that don't inspire you, nothing will.
Well, with that, we will bid you a happy holiday weekend. We will see you on Labor Day Monday, and we'll see if anyone else gets traded between now and then. I feel like there's a chance. So until then, guys, have a wonderful weekend.